Hey everybody, welcome back to the workshop. I'm going to give you a quick refresher on this for people who don't recall it, or some of the newer members of the channel, subscribers that aren't aware of its existence at all. This is a Stihl backpack blower that I picked up as part of a deal where I got this backpack blower and a Stihl chainsaw that both needed work. Anyways, I think this is a BR600. I don't remember exactly the model number, but this thing was giving me fits when I tried fixing it last fall, tail end of the summer into fall, with the hopes that I was going to be able to use it for fall leaf cleanup. Anyways, the issue that I ran into was that I got to a point where it seemed like I had enough compression and I had spark, and I tried injecting fuel directly into the spark plug hole or through the carburetor, and I couldn't get this thing to pop off at all. And I mean, I don't mean like run. I mean, I couldn't even get it to like sputter, which was really confusing me because, I had the Holy Trinity there, the compression, spark, fuel. Then, since those videos have been up for a while, some people have commented, and I think I've even also read on some forums people talking about a potential problem with this dog bone shaped device right here, which is actually what constitutes a flywheel in this motor. So there's magnets in the end here, and when the magnets fly by this device right here, this is an ignition coil, it will develop the spark. So there's a definite relationship between the position of the crankshaft and piston and when this spark is supposed to occur. So turns out some people have had problems or have experienced a problem where their units have lost power really badly or stopped running altogether because the key that there's a keyway in here, and the key that keeps this locked in the correct position on the crankshaft shears, and it allows this flywheel to rotate out of position on the crankshaft. So what can actually happen is you get into a situation where the piston is supposed to be, say, on its way up near top dead center when it fires, and instead it's like way down low, or halfway or whatever. So I decided to get back to this, partly because I've been doing some cleaning up here in the shop and rearranging of things and getting rid of some cabinets and bringing in some new cabinets, and going to try and organize my tooling and everything. And this place has got so much stuff in it that's kind of like an archaeological dig. Every once in a while we'll remove a layer and uncover a layer from the past, and this was not a really deep down layer like the Hendy lathe, for instance, which is really buried. But we do have this back on the bench. Figured now's the perfect time. Spring is here. Going to be wanting to clean up some of the refuse from the winter. Be a perfect time to take a look at this. So I've got it up here on the bench now. And the first thing I noticed when I looked in here is something I never noticed before, which is there is a crack in this flywheel assembly. So I'm not sure how well it's going to show up, but there's actually a crack right here. And that crack goes along and it goes in towards the center there. So what I want to do is I want to try and remove that assembly, and I want to see whether or not, when I take it off, whether or not the keyway in this piece lines up with the keyway on the crankshaft, and also whether or not the key that goes in there to lock those two together is sheared. Well, this is probably not the best way to hold this thing, but hey, if somebody isn't screaming at their video, then I'm not doing at their computer screen or TV screen while I'm doing this, then I'm not doing my job. Oh man. Okay. So the question is that reverse threaded? I believe it is. I just loosened it. What the heck? Wow! I just snapped the end of the shaft right off. Not good. Well, with the nut off, now I can really see that crack, and it's pretty bad, but I guess at this point it doesn't really matter, does it? Because I think I may have just sealed the fate of this thing. I guess this is gonna bottom out before I can even get to, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. Need a smaller puller. Oh, so I don't have a puller that would work on this, so I actually have these wedges, and I just put the wedge behind here and give it a tap, and light tap. I was real careful, and it popped right off. So now, like I said, I want to see. So the key is in the bottom, and unfortunately, it actually looks pretty intact. Yeah, that's where it was. So that was bad of me to do that, because turns out that wasn't my problem, for one thing. And to make matters worse, I broke the end of the crankshaft off, making the crankshaft pretty much garbage. I am kind of interested in this seal back here, though, the way this looks. I'm wondering where all of this oil and fuel is coming from. All right. So the question is, did the Chinese make a cheap kit that has a crankshaft for this thing? Well, this is rather disconcerting. Unlike the Stihl chainsaws, where there's an abundance of dirt cheap engine components for rebuilding those with cheap Chinese aftermarket parts, you can get a whole upper jug with a piston and rings in it for like $30. The blowers, for whatever reason, do not have, from what I can find online anyways, they don't seem to have those aftermarket Chinese cheap alternatives. I literally couldn't find anything as far as like a replacement crankshaft for this, other than a couple of used assemblies on eBay. Now, one of them, the guy only wants like $10 for it and like another 10 shipping. So for $20, I can get out of the doghouse that I've created here of breaking my crankshaft off on the end. But that's neither here nor there, because then the next problem is the flywheel. Used flywheel on eBay, they want about $30 for them. So now, to replace this cracked flywheel, which I'm confident isn't my problem because the alignment wasn't an issue, and the broken crankshaft that I created, I got to put $50 into it, just $50 into this thing just to get back to where I was, which was I can't get it to run. So at this point, I think I'm going to tear this down completely out of morbid curiosity, because I figure at this point one or two things is going to happen. I'm either going to find something that kind of tells me the story of what happened to this engine, and it's going to be so obvious that I could fix it that I'm going to actually bother doing something with it, or I'm going to find something that just tells me, hey, it's a good thing I didn't bother putting any money into this thing, because maybe I'm going to open this up and I'm going to see a piston that is just cooked completely. So only one way to find out. And if nothing else, in the end, this thing becomes a parts machine, and might as well just disassemble it and sell off the parts. Well, let me take a wild stab at how this comes apart. 4 screws that appear to go through the back here, kind of hidden by the straps, that look like they might hold this spring isolated assembly in this cradle, which if I can get that out of the cradle, that'll be a start. Alright, got the fuel line is actually holding this on. And I'm just going to drop the whole carburetor off. And disconnect the impulse line from the crankcase. Just one. And looks like we just disconnect this. Couple of wires here up in the ignition coil. We can get this whole trigger assembly and on-off switch out of here. That don't sound good. I mean, I'm no expert. All right, now see that rusty screw? Sorry, rusty nut. That's what my understanding. My understanding is that's what has had a lot of people run afoul on these things. Somebody laying down on the pavement, transporting for injuries. So, to try and unscrew this nut, you got to try and keep the crankshaft from turning. And I guess, from what I understand, the problem I've heard people running into is they've been trying to hold on to the flywheel on this side, and they end up actually damaging the keyway on the flywheel. The irony being here that my keyway is actually okay, but I've already destroyed the crankshaft. So. I'm wondering if I use an impact driver. I just wish I knew whether or not this was lefty-loosey or righty-tighty. Let's see. Judging from what I'm seeing here for the design, I think that this is supposed to rotate in this direction when it's running, which would make this reverse thread. I never did figure out what the other side was. It snapped. Oh, what the hell. Alright, 17 millimeter. Well, let me just take a guess that it's not reverse threaded first. Alright, that doesn't seem to be doing anything. Try the other way. Well, since it's going to be stubborn, I guess maybe I'll try and see if I can find the answer online somewhere before I go honking on this thing with all the power of this impact driver. Well, that's a surprising answer I didn't expect. Apparently, this nut and the metal around it here is all one piece that is part of this impeller. So the idea is this nut and the impeller come off of the shaft as an assembly. It kind of makes sense now that I look at it, because you don't really see anything else that's holding this plastic to that. I just thought maybe that nut was sitting on top of like a flange, but apparently not. So the trick is, gotta let this spin. I keep dropping stuff here. Pigsty. We should clean this dump. So, turns out apparently it is not reverse thread. So, this is the direction I want to go. Yeah, I'm going to have to come up with some way of holding that crankshaft from turning. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. I'm never going to get that off if I don't. And even if this shaft was still healthy, I wouldn't want to be holding on to it there. That would be bad. Although, actually, hold on a second. Since that shaft is junk anyways, I wonder if I could get vice grips to bite on that. It's probably hardened, so maybe not. But maybe because of the keyway being there. Yeah, the bad ideas abound. Yeah, this ain't happening because this is a tapered shaft, so... No, hold on. I spoke too soon. I may have just gotten a little bit of a purchase on it here. Oh, nope. Just popped off. That ain't working. That ain't working. That's the way you do it. You play the guitar on the MTV. Here's an old cowboy trick I learned from my years of riding the range. I don't have my lasso, so I'm just going to use this piece of wire. See? Put enough wire in there, displaces enough area so that when the piston comes up, it has no place to go. And now that crankshaft can't rotate any further in that direction. I'm going to get my hearing protection before I blow my eardrums out. Alright, wish me luck. Pretty sure this wasn't reverse thread. All right. So normally I would resort to heat to break this frozen fastener free, but the obvious issue here is that we've got a plastic unit that is going to melt. So what do you think, guys? More brute force? Blunt force trauma? Just asking for something bad to happen. Oh, I'm going I'll put this between my legs. Wow. Whew, whew, whew. But you guys didn't think I was going to get that off without breaking something really bad, huh? Wow. Well, ain't that special. Oh. Wow. I tell you what, again, I'm no expert, but to me it almost looks like this crankshaft seal on this side has been leaking. See what I'm looking at? Right here, this looks wet. Oh yeah, that's wet. That is that smells of gasoline. Well, that looks just wonderful. I can't get over how much oil appears to just keep leaking out of this thing. So this is not supposed to have oil in the crankcase. This is a 4-mix technology. In other words, it's a 4-stroke, but it has the benefits of a 2-stroke as far as not having a crankcase full of oil. But for some reason, there's a lot of oil keeps coming out of this thing. I mean, that's not fuel, 2-stroke fuel. That's just like engine oil. Oh, so my next move. Well, I'd love to take this muffler off, but deep down in these dark recesses of holes, there are probably the screws that hold the muffler on, and I would be willing to bet that they are going to be pretty well stuck on there. And do I need to take the muffler off? Well, not really, because this lower bolt that holds the muffler on goes into the lower part of this jug. It does not go to this bottom half of the crankcase. So I can take these 4 screws off and pop this bottom of the crankcase off, which will expose the crankshaft assembly and allow me to pull the whole piston and everything out from the bottom, which is what I think I want to do now, because this does not have a traditional cylinder head like other engines. Now the thing that's tricky about this as opposed to like the chainsaws is that being that this is 4-mix technology, there is a valve train to contend with, and timing, valve timing, and I'm probably going to screw that up. I really like them apples. Those sounds make it more dramatic. I'm laughing because I just backed that screw out and it's got a lot of oil on it. What the hell's going on with this thing? Why is this thing loaded with oil? Alright, so at this point right here, theoretically, I should be able to pop this whole bottom assembly off. But it should be fairly well, I was going to say it should be fairly well glued on there. Oh, that's interesting. What is that? What is that snot? Let me get my, Let me get my snot analyzing tool here. Oh my goodness. What the? Do you see this? This is like glue, gooey stuff. Look where it's really collecting here, right up in this area where the seal is. Could this thing have gotten so hot the seal melted? Oh my goodness, this is just loaded with this goop. Look at this. I'm no expert, but I'm thinking that stuff shouldn't be in there. What the hell happened to this thing? It's like, did somebody really hate somebody and do kind of like a, I don't know, a two-stroke version of Sugar in the Gas Tank? Well, technically this is four-stroke, but you know what I mean. Did somebody intentionally put some sort of foreign substance in here? All right, so let's look at what we got here. So this is the infamous red sealant that is responsible for sealing the lower part of the crankcase, and if it doesn't do its job, then very bad things will happen. You will get air leakage. Bear with me one moment. I just gotta get my cowboy lasso out. Get along, little doggy. All right. Now with that out, this should be able to turn again. Yeah, this is just coated with goodness. Yeah, so I was under the opinion that this should be basically clean as a baby's bottom inside here. All right, I'm going to see if I can pull this out. So what's holding it in right now are the bearings are sitting in their seats, and the seals. The seals are kind of glued in there. So let me see. And let me get a gentle hammer. Gentle being a relative term, of course. There we go. Just send this off to the boys in the lab, see what they can make of it. All right. Ugh. So I'm just going to take note of how the piston goes in on this thing. Oh my. Does that look to you guys like maybe that's seeing a little too much heat? That discoloration there, am I oh wow. Look at the skirt of that piston. I think this thing's, I think it's over, Johnny. Oh, I don't have to worry about which way this goes. I know that the tapered side of the shaft that's broken off was where the flywheel used to live, so I don't really have to worry about that because I'm not taking the piston off of here. So I'm wondering how much of that noise was these bearings. It actually doesn't sound horrible. Oh, that one does. That bearing sounds nasty. Oh my goodness. Look down in there, guys. So, let's see if I can get this light to shine in there without being in the camera shot too much. Alright, so, let me get my snot picker. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at a pile of garbage right here. I don't know if that's rust. I don't know if this was left somewhere with the spark plug out for a long period of time and it was seized up, and then maybe somebody just loaded it with oil thinking that they just let it soak and break it free. Maybe somebody was smoking something. Oh, this gear right here must be what creates the direct relationship between the crankshaft and the valve train. So we definitely should mess that up, right? Oops. Oh, I had to go get my seat for the workbench here, my stool, because this is so upsetting that I need to sit down, take a moment. So I started to turn this just to see whether or not any valve action happened. Look at that, the valves actually work. Oh, that's one valve. Flip it the other way. Son of a gun. You know, the valves don't look like they're bent, they look like they're fully closing. Which I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I had some compression. I'm trying to see if I can see how bad the walls of this cylinder are. And the piston looked like hell. Alright, let me do this. Let me grab a rag and try and wipe down this piston. We shall examine it more closely. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. That's I don't know how much of that is carbon, how much of that is rust. Well, I'll tell you what's not too happy there is that wrist pin bearing. That feels pretty upset. This thing is still spewing out oil. Now that I've cleaned this and I look at the striations on this, they actually appear to be running horizontally, not vertically. I don't know if you guys are catching that on the camera or not. That damage may be more from just corrosion in that cylinder. Now, see on this side, this is what I saw when I first took it out right here. This side is the side that's really scuffed up. Give it the old fingernail test. I felt worse. This is not. Let's see. This is not necessarily a non-starter. I'm so tempted to be the fool who thinks he can rescue this thing and buy that used piston and crankshaft assembly off of eBay. The smell that's coming from this is unreal. Well, maybe that's me. Oh, all right. Well, not much more I can do about this right now. I have to make a decision. It's decision time, boys and girls. Actually, I got one more thing I want to do before I make my decision on this thing, and that's I want to open up this plate on the side here. This gives me access to that gear, which is responsible for activating the push rods that go up to the valve rockers to open and close those valves. Make sure that doesn't have any signs of any damage to it. Well, now that's interesting. Interesting little setup they've gotten here, the way this works. Got this little arm. It's almost designed like a strut, the way it's got this web design to give it strength. And so this is the cam follower, and this is the lobe on the camshaft. So this gear acts pretty much like a camshaft. So you can't take this gear out unless you take these out. I'm betting that this pin must be designed to be pulled out, because the way these are made, this is like one piece, this rod that goes up, and this is one piece. So I bet you pull this pin. Yep, there we go. Alright. Quite frankly, I've seen enough. I don't need to go any further. All I wanted to see was whether or not I saw any signs of any major damage here, and I don't. All the teeth on that gear look good. There are arrows pointing to a couple of different locations on the gear. So I'll have to find out how to time this thing at some point. So I don't know if you could see it or not, but there's an arrow right there pointing to the right, and there's one directly across from it on this side pointing to the left. That's when the lobe is pointing straight down. They point left and right. Let's see if there's anything on the gear on the crankshaft. Alright, so I'm going to remove that seal so I can see this better. Before I make my decisions on whether or not I want to try and get a used crankshaft for this, I decided I wanted to also get a better look at the condition of the connecting rod here, where it looked like it was all discolored, and the piston, because the way that the piston was kind of stiff to move back and forth, it seemed like the wrist pin was kind of messed up. And I'm glad I did that, because I took the clip out and went to push the pin out and it wouldn't budge, and then I tried using a drift pin and tapping it out and it still wouldn't budge. I ended up actually having to put this on the arbor press, my big arbor press, and press the pin out. And when I finally got the pin out, this is what it looked like. You see that band of discoloration right there? That is where the metal from the Babbitt type bearing, it's almost like a phosphorus bronze type bushing that's in here. It's where it got so hot that the metal fused to the pin. So this thing looks like it really cooked. I'm wondering whether or not somebody ran straight gas in this thing.